پروگرامز کیے ہیں ان میں سب میں انہوں نے بہت وقت پر اپنے مضامین بھیجے, ایبسٹریکٹس بھیجے, تو بالکل تیار رہتے ہیں ہمارے ساتھ, بہت سپورٹ کرتے ہیں, ویری سپورٹیو.
صحیح بات ہے, بہت اچھی بات ہے.
دیکھیں یہ آگے
تو منصور صاحب تلاوت کے لیے
جی تو شروع کرتے ہیں.
تلاوت کون کریں گے, آپ کریں گے؟
نہیں, مولانا اطہر ندوی صاحب موجود ہیں ہمارے درمیان.
اچھا ٹھیک ہے, ان سے گزارش کرتے ہیں کہ آپ تلاوت کلام پاک فرمائیں تاکہ ہم.
السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ.
وعلیکم السلام ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. یا ایہا الذین آمنوا اتقوا اللہ حق تقاتہ ولا تموتن الا وانتم مسلمون. واعتصموا بحبل اللہ جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. اے لوگو جو ایمان لائے ہو, اللہ سے ڈرو جیسا کہ اس سے ڈرنے کا حق ہے. تم کو موت نہ آئے مگر اس حال میں کہ تم مسلم ہو. سب مل کر اللہ کی رسی کو مضبوط پکڑ لو اور تفرقے میں نہ پڑو. اللہ کے اس احسان کو یاد رکھو جو اس نے تم پر کیا ہے. تم ایک دوسرے کے دشمن تھے, اس نے تمہارے دل جوڑ دیے اور اس کے فضل و کرم سے تم بھائی بھائی بن گئے. تم آگ سے بھرے ہوئے ایک گڑھے کے کنارے کھڑے تھے, اللہ نے تم کو اس سے بچا لیا. اس طرح اللہ اپنی نشانیاں تمہارے سامنے روشن کرتا ہے, شاید کہ ان علامتوں سے تمہیں اپنی فلاح کا سیدھا راستہ نظر آ جائے. صدق اللہ العظیم.
جزاک اللہ
خیر الجزا.
On behalf of the Institute on behalf of Professor Afzalwani Sahab, who is in the chair, I welcome the Zoom audience to the second Ibn Khaldun Memorial Lecture. This series was introduced last month when this humble fellow spoke on Ibn Khaldun. And now for our next lecture, we thought that who could be our main person to be addressed to. And we decided that Sayyid Ahmad Khan, who is a gigantic figure in the world of education and academics, he should be the theme of the second Ibn Khaldun Memorial Lecture. We are thankful to Dr. Wasim Raja, Associate Professor in the Department of History, who agreed to speak on the topic drawing parallel with the 19th century Aligarh movement of Sayyid Ahmad Khan and Muslim reform movements across Muslim wealth and Shaun and analysis. Sayyid Ahmad Khan was of India's real architects. He was a great intellectual, an enlightened and forward-looking educationist, an outstanding literary genius, an erudite theologian, a versatile writer, and a fearless journalist, a pragmatic social reformer, an apostle of secularism and Hindu-Muslim university. So it's so much has been written on Sir Syed Ahmad Khan that when he's writing again on Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, finds it difficult to choose which aspect he should speak on. So he has rightly situated Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in global Muslim perspective, which is a stupendous task. Dr. Wasim Raja proposes to discuss Muslim reformers in the Indian subcontinent perspective vis-a-vis pan-Islamic societies. Dr. Wasim Raja started with writing diplomatic history, and two of his books concern this theme. Then he moved on and he shifted to the history of civilization. And he has some books and several research articles published, also unpublished to his record. And therefore, we thought that he's the most appropriate person to speak on this theme. So in my knowledge, it will be first attempt to situate Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in global Muslim perspective. With these words, I request Dr. Wasim Raja to make his presentation.
A very warm good evening to everybody. Assalamu alaikum, adab to all. Thank you very much, Professor Jamaluddin Sir. And with the permission from the President, Abdul Wani Sir, I feel greatly honored to be the part of the Ibn Khaldun lecture series. Let me first introduce my topic to you all. Actually, topic has already been introduced by Professor Jamaluddin. So I would just like to, my effort is to situate Sir Syed Ahmad Khan as a global thinker. So in that context, please keep in mind that I will be speaking Sir Syed Ahmad Khan vis-a-vis reformers and thinkers of the Muslim world. And I will be covering the entire gamut or entire Muslim world. I begin by just a couplet which Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had produced in when he was writing a pamphlet called Musalmano Ka Roshan Mustaqbil. He says, Nanalam chon dilast akhir nasangast. Why should not my heart ache? It is my heart, not a cold stone. And we all know how Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was pained with the plight of the Indian Muslim when cataclysm of 1857 was going on before his eyes. I mean, he had seen all those, happenings around, which was happening in around Delhi and Meerut and everything. He recorded in his, writings during time. And most of we know that how much he was concerned about the plight of the Qawm, that what would happen to this Qawm who is going through such a hard time as colonial British India was, turning the things upside down for the Muslim, because Muslim being a ruler of it, of this country for around 800 years long. If you count the period from Muhammad bin Qasim's coming to Sindh, and Muslim losing all those things, course of time. So that was one of the the happenings, all that had affected Sayyid Ahmad Khan's mind. So I start with this background. Let me first thank. I'm thankful to Professor Jamaluddin for introducing me to the IOS platform, a platform for intellectual exchanges, setting discourses, and bridging gap between Indian Muslim communities with the rest of the world. With Dr. Manzoor Alam at the helm of the affairs and efforts of Professor Jamaluddin, discipline like history and its allied subject have got full impetus. With such lectures, hope IOS would serve the cause of the scientific historiography. When there is a gloom around us, and history as a discipline being a target of malicious attacks from right-wing historians. For countering distortion to history, we must come forward and dispel certain myths and rectify the wrongs done to the discipline of history. Here I'm given to speak on a personality who not only galvanized 19th century Muslim world, but he prevailed fully on the 20th century and a torch bearer for the coming 21st century. That is Sayyid Ahmad Khan. There is a plethora of works on this very personality. His works and his thoughts have been, there have been a lot of intellectual discourse on his works and thoughts. But sadly, I feel that this avenue of putting Sayyid Ahmad Khan at par with the intellectuals of the global as a global intellectual or thinker of 19th century, he had hardly been compared with all those reformers and thinkers that I found missing in most of the writings. When we rely most of the Professor David Lelveld or Gil Minault and Christian Trolls all have worked on, though they have somewhere they have put in all these things, but he had not been compared as a global thinker. So I will be trying this at my level best to bring all those avenues which can be which is helpful for the researchers to work on this thing. Now I begin with the background of the Muslim world. What was happening in 19th century? But before I focus on 19th century, I take you to the what you call the turning point in the history of the Islamic world vis-a-vis the Western civilization, that is Europe or the known world. When I begin with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, which had turned the entire history that had led to the rise of the Western power, because 1453 is the landmark when Turks had occupied the Constantinople, and it had blocked the land routes to Asia. Europe was connected with Asia through the Turkish Empire, so it was thoroughly blocking the road. So what had happened after that? That you find Renaissance happening in Italy, or in European context, Renaissance was coming through. Then discoveries, and then a whole lot of things were, Enlightenment and all sorts of things were happening in that context. Islamic world from 15th to 16th century, we find it remained a medieval, medieval world. It remained thoroughly a medieval world, whereas in European context, we find that Europe was turning. They were trying to civilize itself through different means. First, Renaissance had occurred. Then we find Reformation, and then we find Enlightenment, and what you call scholasticism was being replaced with the modern enlightened thoughts and ideas that had galvanized the entire European world, and we find overwhelming industrial West was putting up challenges to the Islamic world. So there was what I'm trying to suggest is that there was a clash of the two civilizations that was going to happen after 17th come to 18th century, not only in Indian context, but with the coming of the 19th century now, we find that the Islamic world was faced with the challenges of how to counter the European juggernaut, which was threatening the very survival of the Islamic world. Survival of the Islamic world in the sense that what I'm trying to suggest is that the Muslim world was overwhelming during medieval period. Like we had Ottoman Empire, which was ruling on the four of the continent. I mean, in Horns of Africa, in European context, in Asia, and vast plains of Central Asia. So, on the other hand, we also find Mughal Empire. Then we have the Safavid Empire. Then we have Uzbek Empire. All these were, great civilizations. But with the coming of the 19th century, or before even then, the decline had set in, and that perplexed the mind of the scholars. How why this was happening, why this had happened. I mean, why the Muslim world could not counter the onslaught of the Western power, which was threatening very much the European the existence of the Muslim empire, and that takes you to the what now Huntington called is the clash of civilization. In our context in the 20th century or 21st century, but I find that the clash of civilization had already occurred during 19th century, particularly in Indian context. If I take it as an example, why clash of civilization? Because I found a number of writings by the then European officials and the European officials and German officials, who were working in India. They considered India as Christian empire now. I mean, that the Christianity now prevails over a Muslim world, and that is why now you have lost power, prestige, perks, and privileges, and everything is gone. The Muslims are now. And after 1857 cataclysm, we find that the Muslims, had nowhere to go, because all the blames of 1857 revolt had fell on the Muslim mind, on the Muslims in general. So, how to defend, this Islamic Muslims by, how to defend the Muslims by these onslaughts of the now the Christian empire, how to live with the Christians now. So these kind of things, these problems were cropping up as far as this period is concerned. We find that now coming to the in the context of reform and progress and all sorts of things, when Battle of Plassey was fought, a handful of British soldiers had defeated the mighty power of Siraj-ud-Dawla, and later on in Battle of Buxar, 3 combined armies of the Indian princes were badly defeated by the British. There are a lot of discussion on these issues, but nobody cares what had happened to the Oriental powers. or particularly of the, if you call it a Muslim power or Islamic power, something like that. Everywhere Muslims were being defeated. And come 19th century, we find that the Ottoman Empire is being shrunk to a very small place now. We know that the Russian juggernauts had all the might of the Russian army had overtaken the entire Islamic khanates. There are a lot of khanates in Central Asia, which was the remnants of the Uzbek Empire. And later on, also they prevailed on other empires, smaller empires, and taken on. All these powers, the Germans, the French, the British, all had they were trying to grab the lands of the Muslim world and the resources they were drawing up. So all this had led to the now what is the impact of this global change? The impact was that the Muslims had almost been cornered, and also they had been blamed for various things, and their property was seized, and a lot of wretchedness had come to their life. So in that context, now we find that the mood of, I'm talking about the mood of the people during 19th century, particularly in India, in Indian context, or in Arab context, or in Turkish context, that a gloom had set in, that the Muslim empires had lost the teeth, and now the Muslim had to remain under the siege of the Europeans. So what should be the way out? I mean, how to come out of these problems in global context, or in context of I'm trying to put Sachin in that context, that a debate had arisen that how to deal with these kind of things. So a number of movements had started, and those movements, one segment of the thinkers, Muslim thinkers, scholars, those particularly those are the Islamic scholars, they started with a Puritan movement. Puritan movement, I call it like because they say they blamed that the corruption of in coming to Islam, Muslims are not following the right path of Islam. That is why all these fate had befallen. I mean, amal, the unke amal kharab ho gaye the. That is why these things are coming. That is why a gloom had set in. You also find in the 18th century, Shahr-e-Asub literature, and then in 19th century also, a lot of writings you find that the Muslims were, feeling a very gloom, a period of gloom, and that there was no future, that how they will, stay in this environment. So what they started, they started countering the Western onslaught. And first movement I recall is that the Wahhabi movement. The Wahhabis, then we also find, Senusha movement, and several other movements had started. They wanted that, and I also find that these movements were purely based on religion and all that. Islam, they took up Islam as their savior, something like that, and they wanted to fight against the Muslims. Like Wahhabi movement in India, they militarily they fought the British. They tried to overthrow that because Islamic empire had been taken over. So they tried to fight, militarily, and their idea was that by overthrowing these empire, Christian empire, we will again regain the power. But that did not happen. That did not happen because the material world of the West was overwhelming, and I find that they could not counter the West. Now, other set of reform movement that is called liberal reformism. Liberal reform, there are a set of thinkers who were liberal in their approaches, and they had they also wanted to counter the West, but through a different means. And in that context, I would like to point out that if you find, though I find that Jamaluddin Afghani's idea is very sometimes very contradictory. He wanted the unity of the Islamic world. He wanted to fight West politically, militarily sometimes, and sometimes he also found that the Islamic world could overcome through different other means of reform and all that. Then we also find Tatar Shahabuddin Marjani, Qayyum al-Nasri in Kazan, Egyptian Rashid Rida, Qasim Amin, Namik Kamal, Tawfiq Fitrat, Hassan Malikov Zardawi, and Musa Jarullah Begi. And of course, in that segment, you also can keep Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and along with his band of companions like Altaf Sinhali, Allama Shibli Nawani, and lot of names you can take up. In this same context, you also find there are two groups. Those I divided it into two segments. One is a confrontational group, and other is a collaborative group. Those thinkers who wanted that the British could be defeated, or the West could be defeated through military, through like aggression and all that, they I have already mentioned. And also those who wanted that why not devise a new method or new approach to solve our problem. They can be categorized as collaborative group or collaborative approach, that there is no wrong in siding with the British and working with them so that our lot could improve. We could also not only that we should submit to them to them, something like that, and become slave of them, but the thing is that we can also, through modern education, through modern diplomacy, through modern ideas and institutions, and adopting science and technology, and interpreting our religious text, which are hampering. I'm sorry to point out that some of the scholars have written that orthodoxical kind of interpretation of religion had led to that regression or backwardness among the Muslims. That is why you need to remove all those orthodoxy sort of things, and come to a rational approach of the life. I have already mentioned about. I have divided it into 3-4 theaters of action during 19th century. One theater is of the Ottoman Empire. That is, there were the thinkers who tried to reform the Ottoman world through various means, and also brought and challenged the orthodoxy. That is, they were also trying to, so because the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan was, the Ottoman Empire was declining, Sultan was becoming weak, and the Turks were restless. So they started a movement called Pan-Turkism, that the assertion of their old glory, that is the Pan-Turkism. So Pan-Turkism also, was supported by some of the Tanzimat reform, something like that. And then we also find Young Turk movement, and that movement led by particularly a great scholar known as Zia Gökalp. Zia Gökalp I would emphasize on Jaya Gokul. One should study Jaya Gokul because for his very, very enlightening ideas. And I don't know. I mean, some of us won't like his ideas. But I don't. Let me first explain why we don't like him. What he says that, which also Sir Syed Ahmad Khan also believed that, and this is very important from our discussion. Because I'm trying to suggest that how Sir Syed was also, very much universal in his approach. Because Jaya Gokul is also a contemporary, more or less a contemporary, and what he says. So listen to this one. He says that Quran need to be interpreted. Interpretation of Quran. Why interpretation of Quran? Quran is one, and why should it need to be interpreted? Because he says that Quran has come for the benefit of the mankind, not only for the 7th century or 8th century Arabia, but for till day of judgment. It's for all time and for all places to come. So Quran should be situated in global context and with all in the framework of entire a span of time to come. How it should be done? It should be done through a rationalistic interpretation. How that should be done? Rationalistic, and the idea is that what he says that Quranic verses are eternal. It will remain as it is, but there is a two words which need to be interpreted. That is nas and urf. The Quranic text would remain the same, but the meaning and interpretation would keep on changing with the passage of time, and that would solve the entire problem of the Muslims facing. And that the same was taken up by Sayyid Ahmad Khan, which I will later on discuss, that how Sayyid Ahmad Khan had used Quranic interpretation in order to make it understand the people, how Muslims should behave, why it is important for the Muslim to see Quran, because in every time you also find that in all ages we find that the Quran had been interpreted. Around nowadays we have got 1700 interpretation of Quran or tafsir of Quran. And if you ask any scholar of Quran that which one is the best one for the Muslim, I think the answer would be very, you won't get an answer that you can take 2 or 3 interpretation, then you will understand Quran in basic terms. For those who knows Arabic, they can understand the translation and all that. But the thing is that in what context which verses had come, नाजिल हुए थे, उसको समझना मुश्किल है. Unless and until you go for the try, So that is why Jaya Gokul is very important in that context, and I find that he's with Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he's also great interpreter. Jaya Gokul, a few ideas are very important also. He wanted a purely secular Muslim state. I don't know why he was averse to the theocratic state of the character of the state. And he also said that the complete amendment of veil, parda system should be removed, and also unqualified recognition of equality of the gender. I mean, these are the radical ideas which we also find in Jaya Gokul's time. Then another theater of action was Arabian Peninsula. I don't know what had happened to the Arabs, that they started disliking Turkish rule or Ottoman rule, and there was antagonism against the Turks, and they later on revolt had occurred, and the Turks were disbanded from the Arabian Peninsula. But when they disbanded the Turks from the Arabian Peninsula, they did not know that who is coming as another master, and it was the entire Arab world was in in the dragnet of likes of Lawrence of Arabia and others, and later everybody knows that what had happened to the Arabian Peninsula. So that is a long story to interpret why Arabs had fallen into how Arabs had fallen into the Western world. In that context, also we have got number of scholars also in that. Jamaluddin Afghani I have already mentioned. He wanted as he is the champion of the pan-Arabism or pan-Islamism. He says that the entire Muslim world to be united into one, and that is why and through that we can fight out the Europeans. He calls for radical revitalization of Islam. But he did not desist from admitting that we also need Western ideas to be incorporated whenever we talk of Islam and all that. Similarly, we also find Muhammad Ali in Egypt. He began a movement known as Nahda al-Arabiyya, that is Arab Renaissance. And he also was in favor of reformism, nationalism, and various other things, which galvanized the Egyptian peninsula. That is, that became part of the Arabism. Then also we find Tunisia's Ahmed Bey. He was also in favor of reform in the moribund Muslim society. That the Muslim society is not hardly galvanized like on the Western model. I should also mention one of the Tunisian prime minister known as Khairuddin, Amirul Umrah Khairuddin. And this Khairuddin, this man was very much in touch with Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Can you believe that? How Sir Syed is a globally recognized person. In those days, it is very difficult to communicate or write. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had written a large number of letters to him. He was consulting this man. Then we also find Rashid Rida as another man who was championing the Arab cause. Rashid Rida is also very much, a great Hanbalite scholar. He says that Islam had given us perfect liberty to order the affairs of our life. He emphasized for the spirit of Islamic laws, for the knowledge of the principles on which they are founded. He believed that the backwardness of the Muslim country resulting from neglect of the true principles of Islam. We should, but he also says that we also need to have achieve progress in science and technology. Now, one more name, Qasim Amin. He was greatly in favor of the liberation of women. He had started Tahrir al-Mu'ara and also Tahrir al-Mara al-Jadida. That is the new woman. The new woman he started with. So all these were happening in the Turkish world and the Arabian world. The third theater of action, which I have categorized the Central Asia. In Central Asia, again, I have already mentioned that how Russia, when Russia had emerged as a great power, as a great superpower during 19th century, it had engulfed the entire Timurid or Uzbek, what you call Transoxiana region. The entire Muslim population had come under their control. Now, when you have a different kind of setup and some other religious people are confronting the other one, so their collision course had started, and ultimately it was a great loss to the Muslims of Central Asia. Muslims had lost cultural milieu. And they almost had forgotten their civilization and all that. But in 19th century, when Aligarh was having this Aligarh movement, Central Asia was experiencing a movement known as Jadid movement. It's a very interesting one. I mean, if somebody is working on Aligarh movement, he must look into this Jadid movement of Central Asia, because Jadid movement was very much similar to Indian context. Indian context in the sense that Jadidism, they called it Jadidism. And our Aligarh movement is also movement for modern education, science and technology and all that. The leaders of this Central Asian movement was very much known figure like Ismail Bey Gaspersky, Abdul Nasir al-Qurasawi, Shahabuddin al-Marjani, Hussain Faizanov. All these, they started attacking those old moribund system of madrasa. Madrasa in Central Asia had become quite stagnated. I don't know, I mean, how I should criticize madrasa system, but the thing is that, when there is a model of Western education is before your eyes, and see how science and technology is, becoming part of life, you cannot continue with the madrasa system of the old pattern. So what they did, they started Usule Jadid, a new kind of educational curriculum they had started. Then started a Tarjuman paper known as Tarjuman, like our Aligarh, Aligarh Gazette or Tahzib al-Akhlaq. On the same pattern, Central Asian Central Asian thinkers had brought out these kind of changes. Then there is a pamphlet was started by Ismail Bey Gaspersky known as Mabadiyane Tamaddune Islamiyane Rus. Now, what they are setting the tone that the Muslims should reform somehow. Though they are inside Russia, but they should reform their things. They also there was a project called Islahi Madaris, and it was all happening during the closing of the 19th century, and you can find a great parallel with the Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and how Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. I could not find a kind of any reference or something like that, that how Central Asian scholars were very much working like persons of Aligarh movement. Maybe in later times I could find some of the reference how they were connected, but I find that is very much similar to Aligarh movement and all that. The fourth or fifth, I don't know, I've forgotten that sequence. Fourth, I take it. Fourth theater of action is now our Indian subcontinent. This is the last segment. Indian subcontinent, everybody knows, those who had worked on Aligarh movement and all that. But I had taken it differently, that how the period should be interpreted. The 19th century India must be looked into, should be based on the 18th century India, particularly in Muslim context. 18th century Muslim scholars, starting with Shah Waliullah and others, I find Shah Waliullah was a bit rationalist, and some scholars feel that he had aspired to Syed Ahmad Khan for a rationalistic approach of Islam. But even then, I feel that large number of scholars, large number of Muslim scholars, for example, if I name that Shah Abdul Aziz, Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi, Shah Ismail Shahid, Maulana Qasim Nanotwi, Sayyid Muhammad Abid Devbandi, Maulana Muhammad Yaqub, and scores of other scholars, both 18th century and 19th century scholars, they, what I feel that they had enough energy and power, both in the sense that they had large number of followers. 50,000, 60,000 followers, one scholar had, each scholar had, and also they were great erudite scholars of Islamic theology. But what I lack, what I find that they're lacking in their writing is that they did not come out from Islamic theology to take up other field of sciences, other things, Had they done it, the things would have changed much earlier. So I find that that is European period of scholasticism before Renaissance. I take them that the 18th century India was fully scholastic in writing and in approaches, and they were working for other worldly affairs. If I within inverted commas, other worldly affair, meaning by that their central focus was how to get to Jannah and to achieve this Uqba sort of things, and salvation and sort of things, and a whole lot of things are involved in that. That is a very I find okay. They produce a good literature, Islamic literature, but massive literature, were not needed for that. But even then, okay, I take it as that they were Islamic scholars. But now, uh, as far as Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's approach is concerned in that regard, uh, I find that the band of the companion which Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had, uh, fortunately for Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, they were a very devoted band of companion. Unlike the previous religious scholar, though they were also religious scholars, but they were very much rationalistic in their approach. Uh, if you feel that, the approaches if I try to define, like Maulana Qasim Nanotwi and Mr. Syed Ahmad Khan, if they are compared in Indian context, that Maulana Qasim Nanotwi was very much traditional, or their approach was the old madrasa system to be continued and all sorts of things. Whereas Sir Syed Ahmad Khan wanted that the Oxbridge model of education to be imparted to the Muslims of India. Otherwise, Muslims are doomed in India, and they won't find any refuse. Uh, I just focus on a passage which I wrote for Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's ideas, that he proceeded to work out an exegesis of the Quran which is in accordance with the naturalistic cosmology. Sir Syed started with the assumption that the divinely revealed Quranic discourse or the word of God and scientific discourse objectively describing the physical world or work of God cannot be incompatible. So whatever is written in Quran, it should be very much in our day-to-day life, and it should deal the entire problem. That is why he came out with a radical interpretation, and he denied the literal truth of the Quranic verses pertaining to jinn, shaitan, angels, creation of Adam, Antichrist, immaculate birth of Jesus, ascension of the Prophet of Islam to the divine sanctum sanctorum, paradise, hell, hand of God, seat of God. All these he dispelled like anything. What he tried, he said that the Muslim to become men of action. Because if you want to change your society, if you want to change your environment, it is the human being himself, themselves, they are responsible for all their ills, problems and all that. So if you want to change the entire thing, you need to have this kind of discourse that that had I think that had angered the very theological band of scholars who despised this Sayyid idea that he interpreted Quran in a very different way, which was not digestible to them. But what I'm trying to suggest is that it is all Indian context, but you can apply it in global context. You can apply it to the pan-Turkic movements of different thinkers, and you also apply it to the Arabism, Pan-Islamism, or any set of things that Syed Ahmad Khan had started. So what I feel is that if Arab and Turkish Muslim societies could be taken as periphery to Islamic world, for Syed Ahmad Khan, Indian Muslim society served as the core. he experimented with this with this idea. And one thing which I would like to point out, that those Islamic world, the Arab world, or the Turkish world, they are predominantly Muslims, and they can go for any kind of change or adjustment or something. But the thing is that the British Indian Muslims, how they should coexist with the Islamic, the British, that was the problem for Sayyid Ahmad Khan to situate the Muslims with the Muslims. And in this corollary, I just like to add that Sayyid Ahmad Khan, according in the words of Christian W. Troll, he's a great Christian scholar. He wrote also on Sayyid Ahmad Khan. He wrote on Tabianul Kalam and something like that, which Sayyid Ahmad Khan's religious side and all that. He says that the Sayyid Ahmad Khan was the one person who is the first man on the globe as man of interfaith. He wanted that the communities should come together. Now the time has changed. Time has changed that the communities should live together. You understand others. You should know your neighbor and live in harmony so that you can exist. Otherwise, the Muslims are scattered in the world. Your power is gone. Your prestige is gone. Your perspective is gone. How would you survive in the British world? So he devised the idea of. He wrote a book on Risale Ahkam Taam Ahle Kitab. I mean, and he tried to focus that how Muslims should dine with the Christians and other Ahle Kitab, and how the bonhomie should be created. And very fortunately for the Muslims of India, that Sayyid succeeded in galvanizing the Muslim and bringing out all those ideas. Now, most of the things people know, so I would like to finish with just concluding remarks about what happened in Aligarh, that multitudes of the enlightened names had happened with Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan as at the helm of the affair. The second generation, the first generation of Aligarhian, really championed the cause of the Aligarh movement, which included Maulana Shibli Numani, Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar, Hassan Mohani, Liaquat Ali Khan, Zakir Hussain, Saifuddin Kishlu, and the scores of first generation of Aligarhian. They really, I mean, what the resultant of the Aligarh movement can be reflected from them, that they were English speakers. They were very much they had delved in scientific ideas, and they had championed the other ideas of Sayyid Ahmad Khan. That is why the confrontationist approach of those Puritan thinkers, could be fittingly applied by Sayyid Ahmad Khan, that pen could be mightier than the sword, and the war against imperialism on backwardness could also be won by pen. In the change scenario Sayyid had envisioned, the British, once enemy of the Muslims, had turned benevolent and had supported the cause of the Muslims in the Indian subcontinent. On the other hand, the confrontationist group led by Sayyid's detractors, like even Jamaluddin Wani had hardly succeeded. And passage time, we find that the imperial power had gained ground, and the schemes of pan-Islamism were a failure. They had failed to understand the might of the British imperialism or Western power could have been countered only by the way shown by Sayyid Ahmad Khan. With these words, I end my talk. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Raja, for a brilliant presentation, which gave us insights into Sayyid Ahmad Khan's vision. He was a visionary. Without a penny in his pocket, he could get a lot of money to build institutions he did, which eventually, for example, MA College, which eventually became a university in 1920. This lecture on during the time when the University of the Aligarh Muslim University is celebrating 100th centenary of its establishment, we congratulate Dr. Wasim Raja, who is an alumni of the university and who is also on the rolls of his alma mater, that he presented a very good article, and he entered into a virgin area insofar as my knowledge is concerned. Some time back, I read in the Hindu when 200th birth anniversary of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was being celebrated. On 17th October 2017, the Hindu came with an article with the title, known for his rationalist approach, Syed Ahmad Khan's ideals are more relevant today than before. Now, this is what Dr. Wasim Raja was also trying to point out, and he's right when he points out that it was Sir Syed who encouraged, motivated interfaith dialogue and discussion on religious matters in particular. Then another thing which he brought out very clearly was the agenda of Islamic modernity. Now, this agenda he could not complete in his lifetime, but it is for posterity, for us to work on this problem of Islamic modernity. With these words, I again thank you, Dr. Wasim Raja, for an elucid presentation. And if our members of our Zoom audience have any queries or questions, they are most welcome. Yes. Any questions, observations, comments? हाँ नहीं है कोई आया लिखा हुआ? I think Professor Zadam Khan Sahab is there. May I request him to give his observations?
आपका म्यूट है वो माइक, ज़रम साहब. खान साहब, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है, जरा अनम्यूट कर लीजिए.
अब आई?
जी आ गई आपकी आवाज.
जी 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 अब आई साहब, बहुत तेज आई.
अच्छा. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Actually, I must congratulate Professor Wasim Raja for covering such a vast area of ideas, movements, pressures, counter pressures, strategies, personalities, and whatnot. So the background is so vast that it also forms a very informative background for Muslim mind to understand their future. Actually, the relevance of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan has got three phases. One is how to take up the past, how to deal with the present, and what are the cornerstones to develop for future strategy. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan is not only great for his educational reforms and so on, he was a person who gave a complete picture, a complete ideology to deal with the times and to make yourself relevant to the situation if you are placed in. For instance, my mind goes to his ideas about facing the challenges of rise of communalism in India and how these communities, Hindus and Muslims, should deal with each other. He has not been welcomed by all segments of society. There are some who can give their own ideas who are not very favorable to all of us. But in real sense of the term, interfaith was a very prominent area with which Sir Sayyid Sahib was concerned. Sir Sayyid was also highly concerned with the futuristic well-being of Indian Muslims, and he was placed in very difficult times because the colonial masters were having full control over the situation in India at that time. And he was trying to create awareness among the Muslims to adjust to the change they are facing. And Islam actually is a religion or a philosophy that pushes you to face the challenge and change both at the same time. And that is possible only when you interpret things in the new context. If you stop interpreting in the new context and if you refuse to change, then the whole problem starts. Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, to my mind, is highly modern in his thought when he says that you should make yourself relevant in terms of adjusting yourself to the changing situation without changing your ideational or ideological perspective and ideological foundations. So I think Wasim Raja Sahib has given a very exhaustive talk on all these aspects, and I congratulate him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our chairman, Dr. Muhammad Manzoor Alam Sahab, is also there online. If I will request him if he wants to make any observation in this regard. A few words from him will encourage us. Okay. I think he has moved away. I thank Professor Zedem Khan Sahab for his observations. And now, without fail, I request Professor Afzal Bani Sahab, who is in the chair, to give his valuable presidential remarks.
Chairman IOS and Secretary General and Professor Jamal Saab, and especially Professor Dr. Wasim Raja Saab, and all others, I wish you a very good evening. And from my side, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm really, thrilled at the moment that what a wonderful, wonderful description of the situation was, given by Professor Wasim Raja Sahab. And this is Ibn Khaldun, this series of lectures, when I am reminded of his quote, the past resembles the future more than one drop of water resembles another. And, the dynamics, the situations, the factors responsible, the thought, the personalities, psyche, then responses and multiple responses, then diverse understanding in the period of Sir Said in the world, that was picturized in a very nice way, very brilliant way. And I believe that he gave a very good idea also to us, to the legal world. I belong to legal world, how to understand the jurisprudence which emerged in the period. So that has been a very good contribution, and I believe it should be immediately, transcribed, and it should be published in the form of a small booklet or in a journal as an article, because it is a life-giving thing. It has sorted out things in such a very analytical way in the real context, and then I believe the best of it, clarity, the clarity that has been brought to it. And that also in all parts of the world which were important then, Turks, and then Central Asian people, Arabs, and also this Indian subcontinent. What were the influencing forces, and who were the subjugated? What were the responses? Positive, negative, reactionary, progressive, and futuristic. All that has been analyzed in it. And I think if I start, reflecting on the best of the versions given by Wasim Raja Saab, it will take too much. But I'm just trying to say that, as Ibn Khaldun would say, that future is past and past is future. And you can see today, I think that this Sir Said Ahmad Khan, his life is a very good guide for any of the persons, in not only in Muslim Ummah, but also in others. And it's not the question of thinking only the sustenance of the onslaught. It's not merely the question of surviving in a particular period of difficulties. I believe it is a question of adopting to such a kind of action which will lead to sustainability of culture, sustainability of thought, a sustainability of reason, and at the same time sustainability of the actual spiritual realities which cannot be denied. And that's how we can find that Sir Said was acquainted with all what's happening in the world, what was happening in the world, in spite of the difficulties of not having the WhatsApp, not having the telephone, not having any other kinds of immediate communications. He was very much acquainted with it, and then he had probably, I believe that, when you are sincere, then you have a good divine intuition also. I think he was well guiding the people at that time, irrespective of the resistances personal to him or to his thought. He was well guiding at the moment, and his guidance was not merely for the Muslims, that was for all communities, for all nations, all human beings in East, West, in Europe. I think his thought is a good kind of guide to Europe also, that how they can, if they did now, they must not remain under this impression that they have been the conquerors of the world. No, you have to be the sustainers of civilizations, knowledge. You have to appreciate the richness or the content of others' cultures as well. You have to look to the lifestyles, other kinds of things. And that's how I believe that, without now referring to objectively to all these areas and the thoughts and to personalities, I would say that Professor Wasim Raja has brought us a world of the 19th century in front in such a way that at the turn of, and rather the first quarter of 21st century, needs that lessons be learned from there. The same kinds of challenges are there. Technology is addressing the humanity in a big way. What should be our responses? How should we use that technology? And then there are the forces of the fascist kind, how they again want to prevail, and how the humanity should respond to it. It's all over, maybe in Europe, maybe in America, maybe in Africa, Asia, anywhere. How the people should respond to the forces of sustenance, the forces of destruction, and then forces of appreciation, and conflict resolution, and so many things. I believe that, Professor Wasim's lecture and presentation, it's a path-breaking one, and it has taken us to real Sir Said, and then a Sir Said who is a global leader, who had the thought for the world, and then at home also he was the best of the guides for the people. And I think a lot of research should be done on his thought, relevant to the times. And I believe that one very important thing should be done, which Wasim Saab has done. That's we have been in the habit of addressing Sir Said's thought only to the Muslims. Now his thought should be explored in such a way that it is addressed to scholars anywhere in the world, in Harvard, in Cambridge, in Oxford, in other European universities, and also to other communities, that he had a message for you, message of sustenance, message of good human being, message of rationality, message of reason, message of scientific development, message for better use of technology and not exploitation, and not misuse of mind, better use of thought. That's how we should take Sir Said to his real pedestal, which he deserves. And it is, we think many things today, but how difficult it might have been to think then when he started from a scratch. And that's, I think, Aligarh Muslim University, that should be presented as a seat, as the thought, as the Sir Said was possessing the thought, that should be presented as the best of the seats where such a kind of thinking has taken place, which is the product of that kind of thinking. And I believe that once if I take the example of law, then all are saying that public interest litigation started in America. Supreme Court of India also says the same thing. But Justice J.S. Verma said, no, in some judgments, Justice Mahmood, who was the son of Sir Said, he started public interest litigation in Allahabad High Court. His judgments are, like that. But we have not been able to present that thought, and we are just saying that it came from somewhere in 20th century, when he gave it in 19th century somewhere in this. So we should not fail in presenting the thought in a right context, in a right way, and also with academic force, with academic, that kind of assertions. With the very good evidentiary proof, with documents and other things. I believe we have a big task. I appreciate Professor Wasim. You have opened a big gate for the working, understanding, doing research. You need a caravan. You can't, it can't be done. Basically the whole world wants it. Arabs want it. Arabs need it. Africa needs it. And they have to explore themselves. That's how I would say. And then I would end up by saying that I didn't have studied anything about Sir Said earlier, but in school we had an Urdu book, and in that his one essay was Tassub. And you will not believe that the day the teacher taught us the lesson of Tassub, from that day to this day, I say, if jurisprudence means anything, if judicial ethics means anything, if legislative ethics means anything, if bureaucratic culture means anything, if administrative ethics means anything, that is Sir Said's not to be biased, they must read Tasub written by Sir Syed then. And all politician must read it, and that's how they must get to the pedestal of humanity back, and then support this, going ahead. Of course, iOS needs no new appreciation. I believe it will keep on, approaching various scholars and scholars of sorts, and they will be, exposing such gems and jewels for enrichment of the people of the world, maybe belonging to any religion, any region, any caste, any creed, and tell them the values, which are there, and the culture which has been there, and the personalities around the world. With these words, I would again thank Jamal Saab specially, that he gave me the opportunity to say something. He is a very close friend of mine, but I can't share with you the secret that we have a mutual society of talking about one another. But sometimes it gets exposed, so that's out of that love. He told me to do something. Otherwise, I believe that it should have been Professor Zadam Khan who could have, and he did. I'm happy that he gave his response on the occasion, and in his presence, it's not easy to talk. But then I had to dare, and then Wasim Saab, all praises to you. But please go ahead and keep doing it, and continue this, and produce a clan of scholars. We need it. We need scholars. We don't need any other thing. So God bless you all. And with these words, I would say that be happy and keep on the endeavor of academics and research. Thank you so much. Jazakumallahu khair darain.
Thank you, Professor Abdul Wani, for the appreciation of the lecture, which I think he will carry in his heart for weeks and months. Dr. Wasim Raja. Thank you, the Zoom audience, for listening to Dr. Wasim Raja, listening to Professor Zadam Khan, Professor Abdul Wani. And now I have requested Dr. Wasim Raja if he wants to say a few words for his audience today. Dr. Wasim Raja.
After such a long, tiring, I know, outpouring.
Yeah, chai milegi thi.
That's good. It's very difficult to how to thank my audience who bore me with patience for quite a 1 hour tiring lecture. Actually, for quite long, I was trying to write something on Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, but being an Alligerian and more than 25 years in Aligarh, you always listen to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and about Sir Syed Ahmad Khan during Sir Syed Day dinner or something like that, and there are a lot of lectures happening. But my urge was that Sir Syed was very much. It had been confined to only his little bit ideas in and around Aligarh and North Indian context or something like that. That had pained me because when I was teaching European history, particularly of Enlightenment and Renaissance and all sorts of things, then I thought that if something can happen in European context, why not can happen in context of what we have such a great genius with us. I mean, our what you call torch bearer is there, and he is not being highlighted to such an extent. So I started little bit, collecting materials and all sorts of things on that, how I should bring him to the forefront of the global thinkers of 19th century. Then I thought that okay, I should first compare with the European thinkers and all that. Then I should come to the Indian. But I thought that would not interest very much the people. So I took up the task of what do you call? I mean, why not compare with our own Muslim scholars? and where they had faltered, and how they supported Sassiyad's ideas. So both these two categories I had in my mind, and that the outcome is before you. So actually, I think that the idea moves the nation, and that was the my crux of the entire discussion, that how idea could change the fate of the entire community. And Sasyad Ahmad Khan, despite having such an award before him, he was I just failed to I forgot to mention that why Sir Syed Ahmad, if somebody asked that why Sir Syed Ahmad was not in favor of educating women, he did not do anything for the education of the women. So answer should be that when he was trying to bring the English education to boys, Muslim boys, then he had faced such a tremendous, opposition from his own people. So can you think of, can anybody just imagine that Sir Syed would be facing the problem when he would have talked about the women's education? But somehow he managed to convince his people, managed to coax the British, British officials. He got recognition with them, and he did not want anything, but he wanted that if a sizable section of the Muslim elite should become educated, and that he thought as a potent weapon.
Yes.
And that is why education as a potent weapon of 19th century led the form to 20th century. And that is why whatever intellectuals and all those things had come to our community, it is all the contribution of Sasyad's ideas and his thirst for education. Rest of the ideas you can explore, anybody can explore. The huge things are there. Even for those who are interested in theology, research in this, Quran and Hadith and all the Sasyad's ideas, brilliantly. It can bring a lot to anyone who is interested on. Thank you very much for bearing me out in this cold wintry evening. Hope this paper to publish, and it could go to more of the readers, and they can take up more and more ideas about Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Again, thank Professor Jamaluddin and the whole IOS team. They are out to do something in this field, and this endeavor will definitely go a long way in serving the cause and bringing the intellectuals at this platform, and definitely it will enlighten us in future also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Wasim
you
Raja.
so much.
And in the end, I will in particular thank our chairman, IOS chairman, Dr. Mohammad Manzoor Alam Sahab, who conceived the idea of organizing such lectures in a Khaldun or lecture series every month, one lecture. So, inshallah, in January, the last week of January, we'll be meeting again for the third Ibn Khaldun Memorial Lecture. Thank you all.